Hey guys, Mallory here at the Flint RiverQuarium in front of our Blackwater Swamp exhibit. Now within our exhibit here we have different types of sunfish as well as some baby bass. So Blackwater swamps are one of my favorite habitats and ecosystems, and while this is a lovely example where you get to see some of the fish that we have in swamps here in Georgia, swamps are also home to a whole bunch of other reptiles, amphibians, birds, and a whole bunch of really cool plants. So this is a cool example, but I can also think of another example of a blackwater swamp. So I'm gonna go see if I can find Rachel, and you hang out, and we'll go find that swamp in a little bit. All right, so we made it all the way to Okefenokee Swamp. We're here at the Okefenoke National Wildlife Refuge with some of our friends from Okefenoke Adventures. We'll see about getting on a boat in a little bit, but first I wanted to share with you a little bit about what it means to be a blackwater swamp. So as you can tell, the water is dark in color. It makes a great reflective surface, but when you pull it up, it looks like this. Much like the color of your sweet tea, the water is this color from the tannins, or the tannic acid. So all of these leaves and the debris and the peat and the moss, as they decompose, they release that acid, or those tannins, and it kind of stains the water. So it doesn't mean it's dirty, it's just brown. A good, healthy blackwater swamp. So, all right, Rachel, you ready to go?
I'm ready.
All right, we'll see if we can find our good friend Chris Adams. He's gonna take us out on this boat. Maybe we should put this water back in the swamp.
Yeah, sounds like a good idea.
Oh, there he is. All right, y'all, let's go see the swamp.
Sprawling over 700 square miles of southeast Georgia, the Okefenoke Swamp is one of the most significant wetlands in the United States. Boasting a staggering variety of plant and animal species, it stands as a truly unique matrix of habitats and natural communities. Its glassy black waters and the complex network of aquatic pathways that winds around islands and cuts across wetland prairies have stoked the imaginations of the diverse and colorful range of the swamp's visitors and inhabitants for thousands of years, sparking many myths and legends. Hey, I'm on Chester Prairie, which is what you see all around me here. A prairie by any definition is just an open expanse of grassland or vegetation with very few trees. Our prairies are not much different than those out west, except for the fact that ours are flooded most times of the year. And what I'm standing on right here, something called a battery. All up underneath this swamp are layers upon layers of peat, organic plant matter that has gone into the swamp over the course of thousands of years and created these spongy layers. Now, peat also produces methane as it decays, and occasionally some of these batteries or peat blooms will come to the surface. Of the tens of thousands of these, about 80% of them are going to sink right back down. 20% are going to linger around and begin to collect seeds from grasses, sedges, and other small bits of vegetation out here. But if they linger long enough, 50 to 100 years time, you'll start to see trees begin to form on some of these larger ones. We then call them houses. But the thing about batteries and houses is they will never become an actual island. Here in Okefenoke, we have about 70 different islands. 60 of them larger enough to have names. The largest one's over 9.5 miles long and 8,000 acres. That's Cowhouse Island to the north of us here. But hope y'all have enjoyed this. We'll talk to you a little bit later. I'm gonna get on through the swamp. And right here beside me, we've got one of Okefenoke's endemic species. This is Saracenia minor Okefenokiansis, otherwise known as the Okefenoke hooded pitcher plant. It's a carnivorous plant that lives here in the swamp. It's found nowhere else in the world except for the region right here in and around Okefenoke. Life in the swamp, for its historical inhabitants, would have been unbelievably difficult. The summers are as sweltering and as humid as almost anywhere on Earth, and in winter, cold snaps come hard and unexpectedly. Wildfires can sweep through the wilderness with devastating ferocity. The swamp is an ideal habitat for venomous snakes and between 15,000 and 25,000 alligators.
Hey y'all, so we found us a little friend back here, American alligator. Now, there are about 15 to 25,000 alligators living in the Okefenoke, and they are an apex predator, which means that once they reach full grown, they are at the top of the food chain. They can pretty much eat anything they can catch, and they have no natural predators. So alligators are also considered keystone species. A keystone species is an animal that helps shape its ecosystem around it. And in fact, if you were actually to remove the keystone species, the ecosystem would collapse around it because they're that important. What alligators do to make them a keystone species is that they actually create these things called gator holes. They like to wallow in the mud. They use their big tail and those large feet to wallow and sit, and that actually shapes the land around them. In the summertime, when the water is low, those gator holes become really important places for other animals to survive because it provides an extra source of water.
So a mix of different geological, environmental events, and even human impact has shaped the character of the Okefenokee Swamp. More than 65 million years ago, during the Cretaceous period, this whole region and much of South Georgia and the southeast United States was beneath the sea. Marine sediments produced limestone rock and a deep layer of sandy, nutrient-poor soils. About 600 to 800,000 years ago, a depression formed within that sandy layer, creating the basin of present-day Okefenokee Swamp. Today, the depression has been filled with fresh water and peat to create what the native people called the land of trembling earth or the land of bubbling waters. So it has been looking like this for the past 65 to 7,500 years, filled with wildlife. You can hear all of the frogs. We've seen a bunch of gators already, and all sorts of different native plants.
The Okefenokee Swamp is the largest blackwater swamp in North America. It is 700 square miles and is located in the southeastern corner of Georgia. Wildlife abound. More than 400 species of vertebrates, including more than 200 varieties of birds and more than 60 kinds of reptiles, are known to inhabit the swamp. Railroads came to the swamp in the 1860s, and with the railroads came sawmills, turpentine stills, store-bought goods, and new people. The Suwannee Canal Company purchased the Okefenoke in 1891 with the purpose of draining the swamp to create farmland. The company ran out of money in less than 10 years, and it was sold to a logging company that logged the swamp from cypress trees. 400 million board feet of lumber was harvested from the Okefenoke between 1901 and 1927. In 1937, the federal government purchased the swamp and President Franklin Roosevelt created the Okefenoke Wildlife Refuge. Today, it is the Okefenoke National Wildlife Refuge. An all-black unit of the Civilian Conservation Corps developed facilities within the area that are still in use today. The size of the refuge has increased over the years, and today it comprises 396,000 acres. The dominant tree in the Okefenoke Swamp is the pond cypress tree right here. Now, the pond cypress likes to dwell in slow-moving water. It is a deciduous conifer. Conifer meaning it is a cone-bearing tree, like a pine tree, that they use cones to reproduce, unlike flowers. And deciduous means that it will drop its needles in the winter and sprout new ones in the springtime. In the fall, their needles will turn a rusty red color, but probably the most notable thing about a cypress tree are the cypress knees. They are woody projections rising out from their roots, and they kind of look like knobby knees. No one really quite knows what the purpose of these knees are for. The most common theory is that they help aerate the roots and do gas exchange due to the fact that these roots are submerged in water with low dissolved oxygen, but it has never actually been proven. Some other theories are that they help prevent erosion by catching sediment, or that they actually help stabilize the tree because it's anchored in these muddy, unstable waters. Hope y'all enjoyed that. Let's go see what more we can find out.
Hey guys, so something cool about when you're walking around or going around the refuge here is you see these trees with the white bands on them. Now we're in a whole stand of longleaf and other various pine trees, but this white band means that this tree is either a good home for and the nest box has been put in, or we know that there is a red cockaded woodpecker within that tree. Red cockaded woodpeckers are an endangered bird here in the southeastern United States. And the reason for that is that the trees where they have their homes is no longer here. So the longleaf pines, the woodpeckers need an old growth establishment or an old growth forest for those. And they'll bore into those trees and make their cavity or their little nest cavity. And a cool fact about a woodpecker is they actually will wrap their tongue around their brain to help protect their brain from the jarring motion of when they're pecking into the wood to make those cavities. So just a cool thing. So when you see these, know that a really special bird is around, among other woodpeckers and other birds, quails, songbirds, things like that. They all hang out and need these woods. So that's why you should hug these trees and protect them.
To travel back into the swamp's interior as a visitor for a day gives one the sense of traveling back in time, or perhaps to a realm where time flows more slowly and takes a place in the background, like it was left somewhere behind the distant treetops on the horizon. Howdy. We're here at the homestead of Tom and Iva Chesser. This house was built in 1927 on part of what is now Chesser Island. It used to be called Little Cow House. But Tom's granddaddy, W.T. Chesser, moved here with his family in the year 1858. They were subsistence farmers, farmed cattle and hogs, corn, beans, sweet potatoes, and sugar cane. Everything they needed was right out here in this swamp. And if they couldn't produce it, they went to town only about once or twice a year to trade for things that they couldn't themselves produce, like gunpowder, shot, lead, clothing, anything like that. But what you're seeing around us today, the swept yard, the wood-framed houses, and the wood-framed outbuildings, all of this labor was done by hand. These people were known as crackers. This was due to their hard-scrabble way of living. In the olden days, water had to be drawn up from a well. Later on, with technological advances, hand pumps came along, where you could pump the water out via a pipe and into a bucket for the catch. If you were going to be cooking outside or cleaning your clothes by boiling water, you of course had to go out and chop yourself firewood. To get this fire started, you usually use fat lighter, which is high resin pine out from the center of the heart of the tree. Split down into splinters called fat lightered splinters or cracker matches. That's how you get your fire going. Sugar cane was the #1 cash crop of the early pioneer people of Okefenoke, as they produced cane syrup, boiled in big cast iron boilers. It was a sweetener that went in just about everything that was out on the supper table. Life was tough for the pioneer settlers here on the Okefenokee Swamp. Work was hard, winters were cold, summers were hot. But this island and this swamp here produced many of the toughest settlers that southeastern Georgia has ever seen.
A plant you can find growing on the islands of the Okefenoke is the saw palmetto, right here. They grow in places of low elevation close to the water table. The saw palmetto gets its name due to the teeth-like serrations on the stem. It is a species of palm that thrives in fire. During forest fires, as the saw palmetto burns, it secretes an oil that acts as an accelerant to the fire. After the fire is over, saw palmetto is often the first plant to come back and grow again.
As you drift on the still water farther and farther in, some subconscious stress-induced tightness in the chest seems to loosen, and the world becomes a little bit brighter, clearer. The sense of being alive is heightened subtly, and you might feel a bit thankful for spots on the map that remain a bit dark, the ones that still have an air of mystery.